Magana Timirandasya Gana Gana Sulakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkness of ignorance, and my spiritual master has opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my most respectful, humble obeisances to the lotus feet of my spiritual master, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vyāsadeva Gaur Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare. Okay, this is Srimad Bhagavatam, translated with commentaries by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And it is Canto 5, Chapter 26, and we are concluding here Sukadeva Goswami's descriptions to Maharaj Parikshit of the solar system, and it's just been describing the hellish planets. And this is text 38. In the beginning, second and third cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam, I've already described how one can progress on the path of liberation. In the Puranas, the vast universal existence, which is like an egg divided into 14 parts, is described. This vast form is considered the external body of the Lord, created by His energy and qualities. It's generally called Virata Rupa. If one reads a description of this external form of the Lord with great faith, or if one hears about it or explains it to others to propagate Bhagavat Dharma or Krishna consciousness, his faith and devotion in spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness, will gradually increase. Although developing the consciousness is very difficult, by this process one can purify himself and gradually come to an awareness of the Supreme Absolute Truth. So the goal is Krishna consciousness. The goal is to become purified of identification with the material body and the material universe, and to lose attraction for material sense gratification, which comes from identifying with the temporary external material body, both gross and subtle. So here, by meditating, reading the descriptions of the external form of the Lord with great faith, by explaining it to others with the purpose of propagating Krishna consciousness, then one's own faith and devotion will increase gradually. So it is, the theme is there, hearing and chanting and remembering. As Prahlad Maharaj reminds us that this is the process of devotional service. It begins with hearing and chanting and remembering. Which is what's going on in the Bhagavatam. Realized souls are hearing and chanting about these different aspects of the Supreme Truth. Qualified speakers and qualified hearers This is the process. Prabhupada's commentary, the Krishna consciousness movement is pushing forward the publication of Srimad Bhagavatam, as explained especially for the understanding of the modern civilized man, to awaken him to his original consciousness. Without this consciousness, one melts into complete darkness. Whether one goes to the upper planetary system or the hellish planetary system, simply wastes his time. Therefore, one should hear of the universal position of the Virat form of the Lord, as described in Srimad Bhagavatam. That will help one save himself from material conditional life and gradually elevate him to the path of liberation so he can go back home, back to Godhead. They say ignorance is bliss. It's not. Ignorance is suffering. So whether one goes to the higher planets, the heavenly planets, and enjoys there on a very intense level of enjoyment, or one goes to the hellish planets and gets these sinful reactions for transgressing the laws of material nature, and suffers intensely there, both a waste of time. The spirit, soul, is spiritual energy and is happiest when in the spiritual activities, devotional activities, serving Krishna, Supreme Spirit. So this consciousness, the publication of the Bhagavatam, like reading here, Srimad Bhagavatam, hearing from Srimad Bhagavatam, this is the process to awaken. And specifically at this time and in this place, Prabhupada is saying here, he's explained specifically for the understanding of modern civilized man, to awaken him to his original consciousness, otherwise in complete darkness, and waste a human form of life. Text 39. One who is interested in liberation, who accepts the path of liberation and is not attracted to the path of conditional life, is called yati, or devotee. Such a person should first control his mind by thinking of Virat Rup, the gigantic universal form of the Lord, then gradually think of the spiritual form of Krishna, Satchidananda Vigraha. After hearing of both forms, thus one's mind is fixed in samadhi. By devotional service, one can then realize the spiritual form of the Lord, which is the destination of devotees. Thus his life becomes successful. So in the beginning, the gigantic universal form of the Lord is the good place to start. To see the Lord manifest in the material, how the material energy is universe, the form of the universe, the gigantic universal form of the Lord. And then gradually to think of the spiritual form of Krishna. By hearing about both forms, then one becomes fixed in samadhi. There's the verse in Upanishads also, one who sees knowledge and nescience side by side, sees things as they really are. So one who sees the material energy, the material form of Krishna in the gigantic universal form of the Lord, and then also sees the spiritual form of the Lord, actually sees things as they are. Because the jiva soul is the marginal energy, which means the jiva, the unlimited spirit sparks, part and parcels of Krishna, they can, with the spiritual energy, the spirit sparks, we can choose which field of activity we want to engage in. Active we must be. No one can remain inactive even for a moment, Krishna explains. So we're going to be active. So we're active in the spiritual field of activity, serving Krishna in spiritual situated in the spiritual energy, free from the modes of material nature, or we're going to engage in the external energy of the Lord. And then we're going to be subject to the laws of material nature. Goodness, passion, and ignorance, birth, death, old age, and disease, cycle of birth and death. It runs like a machine. Material energy runs just like a machine. And if we buy the ticket for that ride, that's what it involves. And it's not a place of any real significant happiness or joy. It's always disappointment and suffering and frustration. Because by nature, we're spiritual, so it is not it's incompatible. Spirit and matter are incompatible. They don't mix. It's described like oil and water. You can shake it up pretty good, make the little droplets of oil very, very small, make an emulsion even, but they never actually mix. Because the base composition is different. They're different from each other on the most basic level. So spiritual energy is different from material energy. They're two different types of energy. And that's us. We're spiritual energy. So it's incompatible to try to engage with the material, in the material realm. So by meditating on the giant Virata Rupa, the universal form of the Lord, which is the form understood through material energy, that the trees and grasses are the hairs on his body, the mountains are his bones, the sun and the moon are his eyes. Like this, there's a meditation for seeing Krishna in the giant universal form of the Lord. There's a meditation there. And then gradually begin to think of the spiritual form of the Lord. Satchidananda Vigraha, knowledge, bliss, and eternity. That form. And hearing about both forms, then the mind is fixed in trance. This meditating on the Lord in devotion is devotional service. Hearing about the Lord, remembering the Lord. So that is like remembering the Lord. Think of Krishna, remember Krishna. And become Krishna conscious is devotional service. Prabhupada's commentary. It is said, Mahat Sevam Dvarama Hurvimukte. If one wants to progress on the path of liberation, he should associate with Mahatmas or liberated devotees, because in such association there is a full chance for hearing, describing, and chanting about the name, form, qualities, and paraphernalia of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, all of which are described in Srimad Bhagavatam. On the path of bondage, one eternally undergoes a repetition of birth and death. One who desires liberation from such bondage should join the International Society for Krishna Consciousness and thus take advantage of the opportunity to hear Srimad Bhagavatam from devotees and also explain it to propagate Krishna consciousness. Yes, this is the process, the hearing and chanting. And this is the opportunity afforded by the society that Srila Prabhupada has established. That if one wants to progress on the path of liberation, he should associate with Mahatmas, liberated devotees. Why? Because then there's a full chance of hearing, describing, and chanting about the name, form, qualities, and paraphernalia of the Lord. Because that's what Mahatmas are doing. They're not doing anything else. They're hearing and chanting, describing, glorifying Krishna. So And then the temples also, the beautiful form of the Lord is there, his Archa Vigraha, being glorified and activities performed for his pleasure, nice foodstuff offered, and then the remnants being distributed, nice kirtans going on, everyone hearing and chanting, or chanting and hearing, discussions going on, all coming through the devotion of the great souls, those that are advanced in devotional service, surrendered in love to the Lord. The Lord within the heart is guiding these devotees. The Lord there manifests within the heart of the pure devotees. So to have their association, to hear from them, and to be directed by them in devotional service, that's the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Have that opportunity. Text 40. My dear King, I have now described for you this planet Earth. Other planetary systems and their lands, varshas, rivers, and mountains, have also described the sky, the oceans, the lower planetary systems, the directions, the hellish planetary systems, and the stars. These constitute the Virata Rupa, the gigantic material form of the Lord, on which all living entities repose. Thus I have explained the wonderful expansion of the external body of the Lord. So we've been reading in this chapter, and this is actually the whole 5th canto. There have been descriptions, at least part 2, of the universe. So what is the universe here? It is an expansion of the external body of the Lord. Is actually an expansion of the Lord. Everything's an expansion of the Lord. Everyone and everything. Nothing, there isn't anything that isn't connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's the beginning, the middle, and the end. Everything is manifested from Krishna, Supreme Spiritual Being. So this material world, it seems very big for those teeny tiny living entities like myself. In this position of trying to develop the spiritual consciousness, Krishna consciousness, devotional service to the Lord. So the material world seems very big, but actually is very small. Compared to the spiritual creation, the material creation is small. It's limited in a sense that it's beginning and an end, and so it's created and destroyed. So it has those, as we would say, limitations on them, because it's temporary nature, so it has a limitation. Whereas the spiritual energy is great. There are no limitations on the spiritual energy. It's unlimited consciousness, unlimited awareness, unlimited pastimes, unlimited joy, unlimited bliss. There's no sand in the sweet rice. So the material energy is it's described like a cloud in a part of the spiritual sky. There's a cloud that forms. It's the Mahatattva, which is the material elements. It's a little cloudy area. So compared to the spiritual manifestation, the material manifestation is significantly less, smaller, if you try to measure in some way. It's said that it's 1/4 has 1/4 of the spiritual sky, material sky. The material manifestation is just 1/4, a little corner to facilitate living entities. Who want to turn away from their own spiritual nature and Krishna, try to exercise their own independence. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 5th canto, 26th chapter, Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled "The Description of the Hellish Planets." And there's a note here after the end of the canto. So there's a supplementary note written by His Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada in his Gaudiya Bhasya. Its translation is as follows. Learned scholars who have full knowledge of all the Vedic scriptures agree the incarnations of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are innumerable. These incarnations are classified into 2 divisions called Prabhava and Vaibhava. According to the scriptures, Prabhava incarnations are also classified in 2 divisions, those which are called eternal and those which are not vividly described. In this 5th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, in chapters 3 through 6, there is a description of Vrishabhadeva, but there is not an expanded description of his spiritual activities. Therefore, he is considered to belong to the 2nd group of Prabhava incarnations. In Srimad Bhagavatam, 1st canto, chapter 3, verse 13, it is said, Lord Vishnu appeared in the 8th incarnation as the son of Maharaj Nabi, son of Agnidra, and his wife Merudevi. He showed the path of perfection, the Paramahamsa stage of life, which is worshipped by all the followers of Varnashram Dharma. Vrishabhadeva is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. His body is spiritual, Satchidananda Vigraha. Therefore, one might ask how it might be possible that he passed stool and urine. The Gaudiya Vedanta Acharya, Baladev Vijayabhusan, has replied to this question in his book known as Siddhanta Ratna. Imperfect men call attention to Vrishabhadeva's passing stool and urine as a subject matter for the study of non-devotees who do not understand spiritual position of a transcendental body. In the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the illusioned and bewildered state of the materialists of this age is fully described. Elsewhere in 5th canto, Vrishabhadeva stated, This body of mind is inconceivable for materialists. This is also confirmed by Sri Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. Abhajananti mamuda manusim tanumasritam parambhavam jananto mambuta maheshwaram. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature, my supreme dominion over all that be. The human form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is extremely difficult to understand, and, in fact, for a common man, it is inconceivable. Therefore, Vrishabhadeva has directly explained that his own body belongs to the spiritual platform. This being so, Vrishabhadeva did not actually pass stool and urine, even though he superficially seemed to pass stool and urine. That was also transcendental, cannot be imitated by any common man. It is also stated in Srimad Bhagavatam that the stool and urine of Vrishabhadeva were full of transcendental fragrance. One may imitate Vrishabhadeva, but he cannot imitate him by passing stool that is fragrant. The activities of Vrishabhadeva, therefore, do not support the claims of a certain class of men known as Arhat, who sometimes advertise that they're followers of Vrishabhadeva. How can they be followers of Vrishabhadeva while they act against the Vedic principles? Sukadeva Goswami has related that after hearing about the characteristics of Lord Vrishabhadeva, the king of Kanka, Varika, and Kotaka initiated a system of religious principles known as Arhat. These principles were not in accord with Vedic principles and therefore called Pashanda Dharma. The members of the Arhat community considered Rishabhadev's activities material. However, Rishabhadev is an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, he's on the transcendental platform, and no one can compare to him. Rishabhadev personally exhibited the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam, at the conclusion of Rishabhadev's pastimes, an entire forest and the Lord's body were burnt to ashes in a great forest fire. In the same way, Rishabhadev burned people's ignorance to ashes. He exhibited characteristics of a Paramahamsa in his instructions to his sons. The principles of the Arhat community, however, do not correspond to the teachings of Rishabhadev. Srila Baladev Vidyabhusan remarks that in the 8th canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, there's another description of Rishabhadev, but that Rishabhadev is different from the one described in this canto. So I got a little bit of a clarification here on evidently a branch of or a culture sprung up from the based on the appearance of Lord Rishabhadev, but it is not in line with the actual teachings of Lord Rishabhadev, so it's not accepted by devotees. And there's a lot of discussion here about Lord Rishabhadev passing stool and urine. And at one point it says that he didn't actually pass stool and urine. And then another point says here the stool and urine that he passed were fragrant. So the main thing is the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not easily perceived, and his activities are not easily understood because they're not material, they're spiritual. You can say with Krishna also, his rasa dance with the gopis, many people see that on a material platform, like a young male enjoying himself with young females. And in one sense, there is a resemblance to that, but because it's not based on the material energy, this is a completely spiritual activity. It remains inaccessible. And where there are so many cults and subcults that have sprung up from, but they're considered sahajya because they're not based on the actual teachings of Krishna. So similarly, it looks like something like this has happened with Rishabhadev, who wandered unkept and didn't clean his body, and he just had passed stool and urine and didn't bother to even move, would just lie there in the stool and urine. So this is confusing people, these manifestations of Lord Rishabhadev's incarnation as Rishabhadev. But his teachings is the important thing to understand. But that evidently is not taken into consideration, only seeing some kind of external manifestation. So people are bewildered. They become bewildered. So Krishna has a tendency to do that. It can only be seen through devotional service. If someone's on the material platform, they're just going to see something material. They're not going to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's a good trick. So we go to chapter, this is actually another canto now, Canto 6. And it is entitled, what is Canto 6? The prescribed duties of, it's not letting me, oh, here we go. The prescribed duties for mankind, chapter 6. And it begins with the history of the life of Ajamil. So we can read the little summary here, beginning of the chapter. Throughout Srimad Bhagavatam, there are descriptions of 10 subject matters, including creation, subsequent creation, and the planetary systems. Sukadeva Goswami, the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam, has already described creation, subsequent creation, and the planetary systems in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th cantos. Now, in the 6th canto, which consists of 19 chapters, he will describe poshan, or protection by the Lord. The first chapter relates to the history of Ajamil, who was considered a greatly sinful man, but was liberated when 4 order carriers of Vishnu came to rescue him from the hands of the order carriers of Yamaraj. A full description of how he was liberated, having been relieved of the reactions of his sinful life, excuse me, is given in this chapter. Sinful activities are painful both in this life and in the next. We should know for certain that the cause of all painful life is sinful action. On the path of fruitive work, one certainly commits sinful activities, and therefore, according to the considerations of karma kanda, different types of atonement are recommended. Such methods of atonement, however, do not free one from ignorance, which is the root of sinful life. Consequently, one is prone to commit sinful activities even after atonement, which is therefore very inadequate for purification. On the path of speculative knowledge, one becomes free from sinful life by understanding things as they are. Therefore, the acquirement of speculative knowledge is considered a method of atonement. While performing fruitive activities, one can become free from the actions of sinful life through austerity, penance, celibacy, control of the mind and senses, truthfulness, the practice of Mista Yoga. By awakening knowledge, one may also neutralize sinful reactions. Neither of these methods, however, can free one from the tendency to commit sinful activities. By bhakti yoga, one can completely avoid the tendency for sinful life. Other methods are not feasible. Therefore, the Vedic literature concludes devotional service is more important than the methods of karmakanda and jnanakanda. Only the path of devotional service is auspicious for everyone. Fruitive activities, speculative knowledge, cannot independently liberate anyone, but devotional service, independent of karma and jnana, is so potent that one who has fixed his mind at the lotus feet of Krishna is guaranteed not to meet the Yamadutas, the order carriers of Yamaraj, even in dreams. To prove the strength of devotional service, Sukadeva Goswami described the history of Ajamil. Ajamil was a resident of Kanyakuja, the modern Kannauj. He was trained by his parents to become a perfect Brahmin by studying the Vedas and following regulative principles, but because of his past, this youthful Brahmin was somehow attracted by a prostitute, and because of her association, he became most fallen and abandoned all regulative principles. Ajamil begot in the womb of the prostitute 10 sons, the last of whom was called Narayan. At the time of Ajamil's death, when the order carriers of Yamaraj came to take him, he loudly called the name of Narayan in fear, because he was attached to his youngest son. Thus he remembered the original Narayan, Lord Vishnu. Although he did not chant the holy name of Narayan completely offenselessly, he acted nevertheless. As soon as he chanted the holy name of Narayan, the order carriers of Lord Vishnu immediately appeared on the scene. A discussion ensued between the order carriers of Lord Vishnu and those of Yamaraj, and by hearing that discussion, Ajamil was liberated. He could then understand the bad effect of fruitive activities and could also understand how exalted is the process devotional service. Okay, Hare Krishna. Text 1. Maharaj Parikshit said, O my Lord, O Sukadeva Goswami, you've already described in the second canto the path of liberation, Nivriti Marg. By following that path, one is certainly elevated gradually to the highest planetary system, Brahmaloka, from which one is promoted to the spiritual world along with Lord Brahma. Thus one's repetition of birth and death in the material world ceases. Prabhupada's commentary. Since Maharaj Parikshit was a Vaishnava, when he heard the description at the end of the fifth canto of the different hellish conditions of life, he was very much concerned with how to liberate conditioned souls from the clutches of Maya and take them back home, back to Godhead. Therefore, he reminded his spiritual master Sukadeva Goswami about Nivriti Marg, or path of liberation, which he had described in the second canto. Maharaj Parikshit, who at the time of death was fortunate to have met Sukadeva Goswami, inquired from Sukadeva Goswami about the path of liberation at that crucial time. Sukadeva Goswami very much appreciated his question and congratulated him by saying, My dear king, your question is glorious because it is beneficial for all kinds of people. The answer to this question is the prime subject matter for hearing, and it's approved by all transcendentalists. Parikshit Maharaj was astonished that living entities in the conditional stage do not accept the path of liberation, devotional service, instead of suffering in so many hellish conditions. This is the symptom of a Vaishnava, vanchakalpata rubhyascha, kripasindubhya evacha. A Vaishnava is an ocean of mercy, paradukha dukhi. He's unhappy because of the unhappiness of others. Therefore, Parikshit Maharaj, being compassionate toward conditioned souls suffering in hellish life, suggested Sukadeva Goswami continue describing the path of liberation, which he had explained in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. The word ashamstri is very important in this connection. Shamstri refers to continuing on the path of birth and death. Yes, so Maharaj Parikshit, he has just finished hearing about the hellish planets. He heard of the whole description of the universe. He heard about going to the heavenly planets. And he also heard about the hellish planets. And because he's a devotee of Krishna, he's becoming disturbed. How can the conditioned souls within the material world get liberation? How can they be freed from this cycle, especially considering the hellish planets? They're committing so many sinful activities that are destined for there. How can they be? How can they be rescued from this inevitable situation because of the path they're on, the activities that they're performing? How can that? It's a disaster. How can it be averted? This is Parikshit Maharaj being compassionate toward conditioned souls suffering in hellish life, suggested Sukadeva Goswami continue describing the path of liberation, which he had explained in the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam. So Sukadeva had, in the beginning, described a little bit about the path of devotional service, and so now he's wanting to hear in more detail. The word ashamstri is very important in this connection. Ashamstri refers to continuing on the path of birth and death. Ashamstri, on the contrary, refers to Nivriti Marg, or the path of liberation, by which one's birth and death cease, and one gradually progresses to Brahmaloka, unless one is a pure devotee who does not care about going to higher planetary systems, in which case one immediately returns back to Godhead by executing devotional service. Chatvadehan punarjanma naiti mam iti surjuna. Parikshit Maharaj, therefore, was very eager to hear from Sukadeva Goswami about the path of liberation for the conditioned soul. According to the opinion of the Acharyas, the word Kram Yogapalabdena indicates that by first performing Karma Yoga and then Gnana Yoga, and finally coming to the platform of Bhakti Yoga, one can be liberated. Bhakti Yoga, however, is so powerful, it does not depend on Karma Yoga or Gnana Yoga. Bhakti Yoga itself is so powerful that even an impious man with no assets in Karma Yoga or an illiterate with no assets in Jnana Yoga can undoubtedly be elevated to the spiritual world if he simply adheres to Bhakti Yoga. Mam evyaisyashi samsaya, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that by the process of Bhakti Yoga, one undoubtedly goes back to Godhead, back home to the spiritual world. Yogis, however, instead of going directly to the spiritual world, sometimes want to see other planetary systems, and therefore they ascend to the planetary system where Lord Brahma lives, as indicated here by the word Brahmana. At the time of dissolution, Lord Brahma, along with all the inhabitants of Brahmaloka, go directly to the spiritual world. This is confirmed in the Vedas as follows. Because of their exalted position, those who are on Brahmaloka at the time of dissolution go directly back home, back to Godhead, along with Lord Brahma. So have to wait until the dissolution of the entire universe to go back home, back to Godhead. Whereas a devotee of the Lord can go right away. No more birth and death, finished. Don't have to go to Brahmaloka and wait for what, for all intents and purposes, is forever. Even though it's probably a pretty nice place. Still, it's not the spiritual world. So, why wait? And we don't know that there are any guarantees that won't be some slip up. Why take the chance that there would be? No longer a living entity waits in the material world, the more chance there is of doing something that has a reaction to it. So why take that risk? If you can go right away, why not go? Text 2. O great sage Sukadeva Goswami, unless the living entity is freed from the infection of material modes of nature, he receives different types of bodies in which to enjoy or suffer. According to the body, he's understood to have various inclinations. By following these inclinations, he traverses the path called Pravritti Marg, by which one may be elevated to the heavenly planets, as you've already described in the 3rd canto. So this is Sukadeva Goswami talking to his spiritual master, and they're having a discussion. Sukadeva Goswami is talking to his spiritual master, and he's sharing his realization from what he's heard. To continue this discussion, he says a living entity is freed, unless the living entity is free of material modes, he gets different types of bodies in which to enjoy or suffer. According to the body, he's understood to have various inclinations. Okay, by following the inclinations, he traverses the path called Pravritti Marg, which means he may be elevated to heavenly planets. So he's meandering throughout the material universe, unless they become freed of the material modes altogether, meandering here and there. Prabhupada's commentary, as Lord Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, Yanti deva vrata devan, pitri yanti priti vrata, bhutani yanti bhuteja, yanti madhyajino pimam. Those who worship demigods take birth among the demigods. Those who worship ghosts and spirits take birth among such beings. Those who worship ancestors go to the ancestors. Those who worship me will live with me. Because of the influence of various modes of nature, living entities have various tendencies or propensities, and therefore they're qualified to achieve various destinations. As long as one is materially attached, he wants to be elevated to heavenly planets because of his attraction to the material world. Supreme Personality of Godhead declares, however, those who worship me come to me. If one has no information about the Supreme Lord and his abode, one tries to be elevated only to a higher material position. But when one concludes that in the material world there is nothing but repeated birth and death, he tries to return home back to Godhead. If one attains that destination, he need never return to the material world. Yad gatvana nivartante taddhamma paramam mama. And, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Brahmanda Brahmatikon Bhagyavan Jeev Guru Krishna Prasadipai Bhakti Lata Beach. According to their karma, all living entities are wandering throughout the entire universe. Some of them are being elevated to upper planetary systems, and some are going down into lower planetary systems. Out of many millions of wandering living entities, one who is very fortunate gets an opportunity to associate with a bona fide spiritual master by the grace of Krishna. By the mercy of both Krishna and the spiritual master, such a person receives the seed of the creeper of devotional service. All living entities are rotating throughout the universe, going sometimes up to the higher planetary systems and sometimes down to the lower planetary systems. This is the material disease, which is known as pravriti marg. When one becomes intelligent, he takes to nivriti marg, path of liberation, and thus, instead of rotating within this material world, he returns home, back to Godhead. It's necessary. So, this wandering continues, lifetime after lifetime, birth after birth, sometimes the higher planets, sometimes the lower planets. But if one is fortunate to get the opportunity to associate with a pure devotee, spiritual master, which is by the grace of Krishna, then one can take to the Nivriti Marg, the actual path of transcendence. It's not a very commonplace thing to have the association of a pure devotee of Krishna. To have a spirit, to be able to take advantage of the association of a pure devotee and to engage in their service, hear from them. Nice little illustration about the turtle who is submerged in the ocean. And they can stay down for quite a while, several minutes at a time, but they do it. They're not fish. They don't have gills. They need air from the atmosphere. They can't take it from the water, the oxygen from the water. They have to come up into the air to breathe. So the deep sea turtle will stay down for quite a while. But then at some point they have to come up. So every now and then they come up to get some air. So this goes on. And there's one turtle, he's been doing this for a very, very long time. One day, when he comes up into the ocean, out of the ocean to get air, there just happens to be a log floating on the ocean with a hole in it just the size of the turtle's head. And as he comes up out of the ocean to get air, pokes his head through the hole in the log. Pretty rare, pretty unique. It doesn't happen every day. So making that connection with the pure devotee is like that. It's very, very rare, very, very unique, very wonderful. But it is by that association that the conditioned souls can take this path of Nivriti Marg and stop this migrating and meandering throughout the material energy. Because without the association of the pure devotee, who is the reservoir of devotion for the Lord, and that devotion, Krishna says, that's the way I can be understood, can only be understood by undivided devotional service. The only other opportunity that the conditioned soul has to try to improve their situation of life is to try to improve materially. So, by coming in contact with the devotional energy of the Lord through his pure devotee, then one can become free from identification with the material body and mind and really improve their situation and becoming Krishna conscious, aware of their actual nature and what their real best self-interest is and where their real happiness is. No more birth or death, no more old age or disease, blissful, happy life. So, and the great souls, this is why they're here, wandering through the material creation, not because they're not wandering in the same way that the conditioned soul is wandering. They're here on a mission to try to connect people up, try to give them that opportunity to awaken their own spiritual nature, to their own spiritual nature and their own relationship with Krishna. So they're also wandering in material creation. Like Narada Muni, he's going everywhere, all the different planets, glorifying Krishna. We were just reading in Chaitanya Mangala how Narada Muni visited Krishna in Dwarka because he was upset. How will the living entities be liberated from this Pravriti Marg? And it's not just Pravriti Marg, but it has actually sunk down into the lowest degraded activities in the Kali Yuga. It's, practically speaking, who's even going to go to a heavenly planet? They're all going to the hellish planets because the majority of the souls are engaging in such horrible activities, sinful activities. So he was very disturbed by this, that although he was experiencing transcendental love of Godhead, no one could take advantage of it. Even when he was present there, they couldn't take advantage. So it was disturbing him. He approached Dwarkadish, who was with his queen Rukmini at the time. And Krishna assured him that he would appear in the Kali Yuga as Lord Chaitanya, the golden form of Lord Chaitanya. Because in his conversation with Rukmini, just before Narada appeared, they were discussing that Rukmini was enlightening Krishna. She was crying. And Krishna was wondering, why are you crying? I'm here. What's with the crying? And she explained that it was for fear of losing him, because she was so attached to him, she didn't want him to go anywhere. And Krishna, he couldn't understand that. But I'm here. Why are you? Why are you thinking that? And so she was able to share with Krishna that this was an ecstatic mood of love for him, and that he would not be able to understand this ecstatic move of love of separation and even fear of separation, unless he himself was in her position. And not even her position necessarily, but really Radharani was in the had perfected this mood of separation and fear of separation. So he would have to be in their position to understand this. Otherwise, he's never going to understand. He's never going to taste it. So at that point, he decided, okay, I want to know what this is. I'll appear as my own devotee, and I will taste this. And right at that point, Narada Muni appeared, disturbed about the condition of the souls. And then Krishna reassured him, all right, we're going to do this. I'll appear as my own devotee in the Kali Yuga, in my golden form as Lord Gauranga, so that I can taste this separation and fear of separation that I see Radha and Rukmini are relishing. And at the same time, we'll distribute love of Godhead to everyone, indiscriminately. No pre-qualifications necessary. Just, here it is, take it. Express route back to Godhead. And so Narada Muni is traveling all over the universe, giving the good news. He's sharing the good news with everyone. Lord Shiva, Lord Brahma, telling everyone. Uddhava is describing this incarnation of Lord Krishna. And Lord Krishna manifested his golden avatar form to Narada Muni. Narada actually had darshan of Lord Chaitanya before he appeared as Lord Chaitanya. So, this is going on. Devotees are thinking like that. People are suffering so much in the material world. They're going to higher planets, they're going to lower planets, and they're not getting anywhere. They're just going around and around like a hamster wheel. Birth and death, birth and death, birth and death, sometimes higher, sometimes lower. I'm not getting anywhere. So the devotees have this anxiety. We can see here Parikshit Maharaj has this anxiety. So he's questioning Sukadeva Goswami, and Sukadeva Goswami is elaborating on the path of devotional service. That's why we're so interested in Srimad Bhagavatam. We get to hear these topics because we're the ones that they're in anxiety about. Life after life, birth after birth, round and around we go, the cycle of birth and death, material nature. So this is for us. Prabhupada said, I've written these books for you. Prabhupada has written these books for us. Or translated. It's translated with commentary. Text 3. So this is Parikshit Maharaj. Actually, I think we'll stop there and we'll take up next time with text 3. Hare Krishna.